Are you crazy?
All these things, I'm looking forward to trying to contribute.
No, thank you for coming on at such short notice, because I know this was a real quick thing for you. Normally, you probably plan these things ahead, so we really appreciate it. We already actually did one episode on this topic.
Yes.
It was called Survivalism and Prepping for Catastrophic Events, Part 1. Just because I want to get the keywords in there. But, you know, I think it's really prudent to be talking about these subjects right now. And I'm sure your businesses have been kind of shooting through the roof in terms of the kind of interest they're getting, right? Maybe we can talk about that at some point. There's a lot of questions we have, and there's a lot of discussion points. And I think we only really have an hour. So I'm going to dive right into your intro, and tell me if I get anything wrong, by the way. But you're an executive protection agent, a vlogger, an author, and a military veteran whose mission is to improve the quality of the world by making people more dangerous. I like that. You've served 2 deployments to Iraq, and you were the squad leader for 4 years. Today, you're the CEO of Bravo Research Group, which is a boutique private security firm in South Carolina, and the founder of Protector Nation, a training company for first responders, private security professionals, and civilians. You are also the owner of a separate school and training academy called the League of Executive Protection Specialists. And that's not all. I mean, I could have gone on and said everything else that I found on your bio, but obviously you're doing a lot of different stuff. I mean, you were really, it's a really impressive kind of thing you've got going on here. So, yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you. Southern California, not South Carolina. I think I heard that.
Oh, Southern California. I'm so sorry. Southern California. I want to ask a question that I think is on most people's minds, not everyone's mind, but at least who's present here. What the hell is going on with the world right now? Are we going to have a war? Like, what's the reason for this buildup of aggression and violence between countries and powers? Can you shed some light on your thoughts about our current situation today?
I mean, how weird do you want me to get, buddy? This
is called Podvocative, so you can pretty much say anything you want.
Yeah, so the way I kind of burn through it is that there are reasons for it. I believe personally that there are those in power that have always wanted domination and subjugation. I look up Agenda 21, and I think that there have been a lot of very deliberate moves designed to make man more dependent instead of independent. If you look at the reality that our world is designed for money, not mankind anymore. I don't believe medical professionals should be getting compensated, based on people coming into their offices. I feel like it's a conflict of interest. The medical industry, they want to make money, which means you need to have problems, which means maybe, that you need to have problems. Your food has things inside of it that are more fiscally responsible and more fiscally oriented than health oriented. And every industry in this world that we use and leverage, and it's more fiscally, responsible than it is responsible to humanity. And there's a lot of what I believe social engineering designed to help a more consumer-driven planet than to help humanity thrive on the planet. I believe we were given everything we needed to really thrive, and that's been kind of rearranged. And so I think that there are a lot of things taking place to perpetuate more fear, which would make us more dependent, which would make us stop focusing on the power we have and start looking outside of ourselves for that, because that is just simply more profitable for so many organizations and corporations and people in positions of power. I went to war and did things, all around the world, and when I really sit back and you start following the money involved, it's an interesting little rabbit hole to go down. So and then the way that I approach this equation, though, is that there is evil in the world. There will always be evil in the world. I have understood that I understand that you can't understand evil. I've seen things that people are capable of that are not understandable to a normal person and are not worth understanding. But I have to fight from the understanding that this will exist. This does exist. I don't do battle or war or violence because I want to. I hate violence. I hate war, but I must be formidable and I must be good at it until the day that evil does not exist. So why? I don't concern myself with as much as the tactics necessary to defend and protect everyone and everything that I love. And so I make sure that I'm a learned student in those things so that when I need that parachute, I have a parachute, because when you need a parachute, all you need is a parachute. So that's kind of why I live this life, and that's why I've really endeavored to make this my contribution to the world. I want to make the world a safer place by helping good people. I want to multiply protectors. Protectors are the white blood cells in the body of humanity. I want to multiply protectors in this world. So next time there's an active shooter, an active human threat, the body count's not in the double digits. It's like those other countries like Israel, for example, where, there's terrorist attacks, but it's like, oh, there was a terrorist attack. He shot one person, maybe wounded a second person, and everyone acted upon him, and he was extinguished immediately. Not the person had enough time to shoot up an entire church, an entire club, an entire school before good people were able to react effectively, because your opinion doesn't matter when it comes to reality. Gravity acts upon all of us. Violence is the same way.
You've touched on like a lot of different things there, and I can sense how passionate you are about this, right? Because I'm the same. If I start talking about something I'm passionate about, I'm going to be like talking about every facet of it, and I'm going to let my brain just run wild. In terms of like the conflict of interests that you mentioned, where for first responders or people in the medical profession are being paid to treat people when in actual fact it's probably making the problem worse, or at least it's counterproductive, right? We've talked about that on this show before. So what I'm getting from you with that is that there's like a systemic issue which is kind of driving us towards some at least a flashpoint or some kind of critical event. I feel that this is something that's been building up over time, and the podcast is called Podvocative, right? We're not afraid to talk about topics that, or at least ideas that people have about, why the world is the way it is. I have my own. I feel crazy a lot of the time because I feel like there's a very thin layer of people who are really looking for these answers, right? And they're trying to find them, but no one really knows because it's a difficult, complex subject to get to the bottom of. Sam Harris recently tweeted out or said that there's been a surge of people who are now kind of like conspiracy theorists. And the problem that he has with that is that they are not, in his opinion, qualified to research things for themselves. I like Sam Harris, but I feel like he's kind of picking at, I don't know what the expression is, but he's looking for things that maybe in his mind allow his beliefs to continue to be correct. When in actual fact, who the fuck is qualified to look for these independent research and right. So I have a big problem with that. I have a big problem with labeling people conspiracy theorists and then saying you're not qualified to do your own research, when in actual fact, it's probably the mainstream, which is the worst place to go to get your information.
100%. And obviously, I'm big on social media, so I know they control the information you guys get. If I post on certain topics, I get shadow banned. I get shut down, right? So I'm on 10 different platforms. I'm on 4 different profiles on Instagram. When I touch, like this one broke my heart. I posted 2 posts about the earthquakes over in the Middle East with the kids being pulled out of the rubble and all that stuff and being rescued because of that carnage. And I said something like, like, what a reason for good people to become powerful, to be able to help other people in need. Like, this motivates me to want to become more financially potent, more capable, more successful in business, so I can get assets over there to help people, regardless of their beliefs and the stuff, And I got shadow banned so hardcore. No one saw my next 3 posts until I finally took those 2 posts of those kids getting rescued out of that building down. They just didn't want me to talk about it. So that's what I really worry about, is that it's becoming very difficult to find any dissenting opinion or any actual information. Like, just yesterday, 6 scientists that were flying out to, I believe it's Ohio, where the spill happened, were in a plane crash and they died. Like, and why has this not even been on the news? But anyways, I'm getting away from my point. But to your point, like, I feel like there are a lot of people, because of the social engineering from mainstream, that we have 2 types of people. We have the ones that are kind of like, just eating that spoon-fed information, and they're being shaped, and a lot of it is fear-based. And then you have the people that are at least brave enough to try to look at another opinion, and try to keep an open mind and try to make a decision for themselves. And I think it's a larger body than they want to let on. And those people are the people that I really, really want to commend, because those are the people that are going to help us not just be pushed into a direction where we get sheared. Like with this whole, I feel like they're trying to start World War III right now. When you follow the money and understand how much money these people stand to make from a war, and how much control they can have, and the fact that our sons and daughters, and possibly myself, might end up out there dying on a battlefield for something that's not driven for the betterment of humanity. Nothing very much is anymore. It's always money. What is worth people dying? Like, why can't 2 dudes get into a room and have a conversation and solve any problem? You know what I mean? I know it's possible, but yeah, man, the way that we're working scares me.
I have spoken to quite a few military or ex-military personnel. What I've found is it is a mixed bucket, right, when it comes to their thoughts and feelings about war and the industry. So I'm kind of really happy, or not, that's not the right word. I'm kind of like, I'm pleasantly surprised that you feel that way, since you've served so much, because I also feel the same way. I don't believe that war is, something we should be accepting of.
There's no good reason, man. I mean, people are gonna die, lots.
Everybody loses in a war. Everybody loses. Both, even if you win in a war, you still lose.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a luxury to be blissfully ignorant anymore. I was speaking to my brother recently, and, he's got a family, right? I don't know if you have a family too. I know you do, Hillary. When you have people that you need to take care of and you need to be responsible for, I think your options for kind of going out there and spending your time and resources, trying to help others and being around for others kind of really gets strangled. So what he said to me was, there is a value in blissful ignorance. And we were talking about my stress, right? About the kind of content I consume and the things that I learn and how to deal with it. So from his perspective, I can't understand that. But I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Martin Luther King, who kind of, I'm not going to phrase him correctly, but he said something along the lines of, it's the people who are silent that are going to essentially be the biggest problem when it comes to this kind of authoritarianism or any kind of tyrant, because they're the biggest body of people. And so if you can't get those people to actually do anything or say anything or stand up for what's right, I think you have a really big problem, because It falls down to the other crowds, which are the ones like, us who are trying to make things visible. And maybe also the crowd that is the least likable, the one that's shouting the most, making the biggest noise about all the things that we don't want. Alex Jones.
I love, what I mean? He's been right about a lot of things, but I'm like, are you making us look better or worse? I mean? Like I wonder if he was a plant just to make it seem like anyone that agrees with him is also crazy. You know what I'm saying? I mean, much respect, but just a thought.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard that one before. Anyway, I mean, I guess I'm glad that we're here. I'm glad that we're doing this. Tell me a little bit about your experiences, in the military that made you kind of have this change of course of career. What is it that made you the person you are today? Was there any kind of events and specifically that you can remember that you can shed light on?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a protector. I talk a lot about the protection DNA. I talk a lot about that guy or girl that's always kind of been a protector, that wouldn't let his friends get bullied and things like that, that always would stand up for what's right. I always want to encourage those people, train, become formidable. But I grew up in so I was born in the Bahamas. And my mom is from Washington State. So in the Bahamas, I was the only kind of American little kid. So I always had to kind of learn how to fight by myself, because it was like, hey, fat boy, hey, let's jump the American because he's soft, so I had to learn to fight by myself. Then I had 5 sisters. So I had to learn to fight by myself. And then when I would go to the US, I was in an environment in Washington State around a bunch of Pacific Islanders. So then I had to learn how to fight by myself. And then I went to a kind of a preppier school in Gig Harbor, and I was the only black guy, so I kind of had learned this independence. And I always knew that I was a warrior. And I always kind of asked God, my Heavenly Father, for a righteous battle, how can I know this is who and what I am, but how can this be done righteously, And, they're kind of role models and stuff, but all the church guys were kind of too soft. And my dad's very intense. My dad's also a warrior, one very successful businessman in the Bahamas, got shot at point blank range with a shotgun when I was young, survived that. He's like a monster, but he's an awesome man. Right. And so I kind of had that modeled for me. And then when I started to get older, I was just kind of like, well, what's a worthy way to live? And then I looked at the military and I was like, hey, man, I'm a young, formidable man. It's kind of my duty. If we're going to war, I got to go do the thing and get my masculinity settled for myself and all that stuff. So in the military, I just really honestly felt at home in a lot of ways, being a legitimate warrior and going to war. And I have a lot of experiences in there. I'm getting blown up. I got blown up 5 times. I got hit by 5 IEDs. I had an out-of-body experience. And I just feel like God was shaping me and molding me into who I was supposed to become. I got to see how evil things are. I got to roll up into areas of operation where people were getting, the entire police force was just slaughtered and there's blood on the walls, and we need to come in here and instill order because these vulnerable people are just getting picked on, and not picked on, murdered and raped. So, I started to kind of really see the use and the level of service that a righteous warrior could actually do in the world. And I got to see that when bad things happen, I was raised in church, I'm a Christian, right? So everyone's like, pray about it. And I'm like, yeah, cool. But I got to see that when bad things happen and women and children are being slaughtered and raped and murdered, like they are right now while I'm talking to you around the world, angels are not ziplining in from the heavens protecting them, no matter how much people are praying. Sometimes things happen, but really what happens on this planet is what the strongest and most formidable males generally decide happens. When God wants to get something done on this planet, he sends a man, he sends a woman. Whether that's right or not, I do know one thing. The strongest and most formidable human will dominate the day, right? An active shooter takes place. That guy does whatever he wants until a good person with a gun or a weapon or enough good people decide to stop him and act against him. And so I started to make this realization, and then I got into executive protection. And I got to travel, my very first year, by the grace of God. Literally, he was like, hey, go here, do this. I'm going to make you a bodyguard. You're going to travel the world. I listened, I went, bounced. A guy picked me up out of a bar, traveled the world, hit 60 different countries my first year, lived that way for 7 years and got to see more of the world, become a professional protector, protect 1% all around the world. A lot of missionary work. A lot of it was around missionary work in dangerous places and in some of the nicest 7-diamond hotels of the world, like that life. And I got to really see that protection is one of the highest acts of service. And then once I kind of got through that pipeline, I started to realize, like, what can I do? What if I can multiply protectors in the world? What if I could teach that single mom how to live a safer pattern of life? What if I could and what if I could teach her how to become formidable, and so that she can defend herself? What if I can teach these young men, like, this is a pipeline to be formidable and to be a protector and to be the type of guy that can stop something from happening instead of having to beg for your life in front of your family? You know what I'm saying? What if I could inspire people to go into those dark places where people are being mutilated and raped right now, and do good things? And so that's when I started to really lean into being more than just an operator when it comes to being a protector, being a contributor, an influencer, or a force that, like, multiplies this protection DNA in the body of humanity. That's kind of how I got here in a nutshell.
That's incredible background. And
I got to jump in and ask a question here before we move on to the next thing. But how does that change your perspective on humanity and how you view what humans are capable of? I think so many of us are focused on, are we getting the right Starbucks latte? And if we can go to Target today, things that are meanderingly is, bullshit. First world problems. Yeah. And then you go there and you experience that kind of stuff, and you see the blood on the walls, and you see the dead people and the raped women and the killed kids. And how does that change your perspective? Not just on, life, but, what people, I think, are capable of.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a great question because you see people do horrible things and you want to believe you're better than them. You get done with a firefight and there's, like, bodies sitting in the corner of the room, and you're kind of like, one part of your brain, like, and so I have a master's in psychology as well. So, like, one part of your brain, like, your protection responses that is trying to, like, what's trying to protect your identity and your moral superiority and all these things will try to cause you to kind of try to make yourself different, But what I've seen, because I've seen people in so many different positions, like, I've seen people deal with extreme fear. We're getting shot at. What do you do? We just got blown up. What do you do? Extreme fear. And I've seen people staring at a briefcase of, $100,000. I've been in 7-diamond hotels and in palaces, and I've seen how it impacts these people. And I've seen people say, I'll never do that. And I've seen them do it. You know what I mean? And I've seen people, and I've been in positions where I've ran tests when I was in Iraq. I remember, this is crazy, but I remember thinking to myself, like, hey, if they, said, if you smoked everyone here, if you just leveled this village, if they said you could go home, would you do it? And I was like, man, I really am considering this. This is gnarly, And then I got back, and then I remember being like, ask yourself this question when you're back home. And I was back home, and I was like, well, would you have leveled that village? And I was like, no, of course not. And then I was going back to combat, and I was like, ask yourself that question at the peak of your next deployment. And I started being like, yeah, man, I really want to go home, dude. And so I started to realize, and Jordan Peterson talks about this, we're all capable of so much. I actually talked about this on Instagram today. Everyone acts like they know themselves, but you don't really know yourself unless you're working on yourself, unless you're in that flow with yourself all constantly. Because why can't you get yourself not to eat the cookie? Why do you say things you don't mean? Why do you have very little control over yourself, right? So to answer your question in a more succinct manner, I learned that humans are capable of almost everything, Every single person is capable of almost everything. The things you don't think you're capable of, you're probably capable of in the right circumstances. And knowing that is the armor against that. Okay. And understanding like your boundaries is the armor against that. Thinking you're better than the things you see other people doing is what makes you vulnerable to descending into those levels of barbarism. Now there's a level of evil that's just evil. That's a whole nother kind of category, but there's a lot of shades of gray that we're all very capable of. And it really strengthened my resolve to be just as ruthless at being able to stand between innocent people and the evil people. And then it also, the last thing I'd say, it made me very afraid of ignorance and ignorant people. Because if you get a large volume of what we have, like a lot of really ignorant people, they're easy to control. They're easy to weaponize. We've seen the weaponization of ignorant people, like when it comes to a number of different social issues that people are burning cities down in America over. And, you see the social friction. I believe a lot of that has to do with weaponizing people that don't have much to lose and things like that. So I learned that everyone's capable of almost everything. Most people are capable of almost everything. The guy laying on the floor that lost the firefight is just a human that had different ideas. I lived a different pattern of life. And unfortunately, he lost and you won or whatever. And so it's really kind of it's a gnarly thing, but it's a good thing to know. I think everyone should go on missions trips. Everyone should see the full spectrum of what this world can have. Otherwise, you don't know how to be thankful for what you have. Your Chakamaka latte thing. And how clean it is. Well, and the last thing I'll say, the last huge thing it did is it helped me understand real misery. And so like every day that I'm not like fighting for my life and I'm able to sit here and my family's not under threat of like war or any of those horrible things is a good, very good day. Cause I remember being ready to take a life over just being able to have a hamburger again. Cause we're going weeks without showering and hadn't seen anything clean. Like how clean this world is. Like your room right now, it's so clean. It's just such a blessing.
Wow. I jump in, guys, because I'm sure there's a bunch of questions.
I'm a long answer guy. I'm sorry. If you guys need to, just give me like a ceasefire thing and I'll like.
This is what makes you such a great guest, just because you really go into it, and you talk so truthfully, like wearing your heart on your sleeve sort of thing, where you don't try to sugarcoat anything. You talk about the things that you've seen and you really give it to the listener straight. So I think my question would be, like Clement was saying earlier, how your strategy for survival is going to be different if you have a family. If you're married, if you're a parent, definitely different from being a single person, or like if you have pets even, like how do you strategize for things like that? And so in part one, we talked about some practical tips on what to do, right? Like you got to have a go bag, a grab bag, whatever. But we also talked about how, for me, the biggest threat wouldn't even be zombies, right? Like you think, okay, shelter, food, warmth, supplies. But my biggest fear would be other human beings, because like you mentioned, the evil and the greed of other human beings, and especially the ignorant people. Ignorant people are so unpredictable. You never know the lengths they'll go for what they want. So if we were in that situation, Byron, personally, if we were in that situation, what is the first thing that you would suggest we prepare for when it comes to the human factor of survivalism or a catastrophe?
Yeah. I smile because I was recently doing some consultation for a high net worth family, and they had everything. Like they had everything, the shelters, the provisions, the ammo, like everything. And I remember sitting there with them and they're like, okay, so, like after it happens, the hit the fan scenario and, say we survive, we come out of our shelter, what do we do next? And I was like, you start a gang. You start a gang. You become a warlord. You use your provisions to link people together in the endeavor, in a mutually beneficial shared endeavor, the number one asset is going to be your network, and it's going to be manpower. You can have all the provisions in the world. If someone has a larger and stronger network with higher quality manpower and the tools to be able to really leverage that, they will dominate. You're doing nothing but consolidating assets for them. And I've seen it. I've literally invaded a country, and a city, and watched us shut the power off where there's no law. There's the law of man, which is the highest law on this planet, other than, the grace of God. But even he said, let man have dominion on this planet. So the highest man, strong men. So with all that having been said, you're 100% correct. Your biggest threat is going to be humans. And so human resources is also going to be, that's who's going to win. So being able to organize those things. So like gangs and things like that are already established and already have an honor code, those guys are going to be ahead of the game. So one of the biggest levels, most important things to preparing is preparing your gang, is preparing your pack, your pride, your like-minded individuals who have the same values and can really, really knit together with you in an endeavor that joins you all together, that is mutually beneficial. That's going to be the number one thing you're going to want to assemble. And that's kind of what I like working on assembling right now for the world. Because you can have all the stuff, and it's going to come down to strength in numbers.
I have a question about that, actually. So let's say you're not a born leader. Let's say you're kind of like more of a submissive person, or you don't have the skills necessary to pull together those kinds of people under your belt, let's say. What would you say to someone like that? Like, if that's your first piece of advice after an event like that, how can someone who's not a born leader build a community?
Right. Who's not like an alpha. Like every single role is important, like this whole like alpha beta thing. Like, I don't really like it, but like you need a unifying leader or body of leadership. You need all the other guys. Like on my teams, I tell everyone, you're all leaders, no matter what position you're in, from the first guy to me, we're all leaders. We're all decision makers. Now, to address your question, become useful. That is the main thing. Like, maybe you possess a skill that makes you useful. Maybe you possess something you can do with your hands. Maybe you possess something you can do with your mind. So taking it kind of back to man code, like everyone has a skill. Maybe you don't have a skill, but you're a really good follower. Like that's the guy I can ask to get it done. He's going to get it done, and I can trust him. Like as a leader, that guy is my guy. I'm protecting that guy. I know I can trust this guy. So maybe you come into it and you're like, look, I have this vision and I see this need. We need to organize ourselves. We need to come up with a strategy to link up if something catastrophic happens. We need to figure out where it is. Like, I'm not really the natural born leader guy, but I'm 100% committed to this cause and will do any and everything within my power to make sure we get there. That is a very valuable human being. And so that is really kind of would be my approach to that. Like, don't try to be anything you're not. But as you show your loyalty, and as it is with every platoon, right? Like, you get these platoons, you get this guy up here who's high performance, competent, strong, physically potent, all that stuff. But then you get these other guys, all up and down the spectrum, and they all earn respect as they prove that they can complete the tasks and they have that loyalty and dependability. So that would be kind of either have a skill or be dependable and loyal, and the other men will be like, and then we can continue.
Yeah, the piggyback on that a little bit, how valuable would you say is having tradecraft to like kind of add to your value in that situation? Like, whether it's, you're good at metallurgy or smithing, or you have skills in carpentry, things like that could be valuable in a, bit more of a dystopian world where it becomes a bit rare to find. Are there some trade skills out there? Maybe there's some obvious ones, maybe there's some unobvious ones that you've thought about that people should consider in a situation like that? Maybe a good, hobby to pick up.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think most of them make sense, like the metalworking, someone who understands agriculture, all the mechanical stuff. The other one that might not be as obvious is comms, someone who understands how to get communication up and ham radios and all that stuff. Those skills, I think, are going to be everything. There's going to be a lot of combatants. But understanding guerrilla warfare and being a formidable combatant, obviously, medicine. Oh my gosh, medicine. These are skills that you're absolutely going to need, and when you do have one of these skills, it makes you one of the most valuable people in the pack, like by far, So yeah, man, that's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, I think we're all getting some ideas here about what we're going to be spending our time on over the next couple of months. Fingers crossed we have another couple of months. So you mentioned how you were with a well-off family recently and they had everything. Is that like overkill? What would you kind of say to someone who's preparing for a crisis, whether it's a world war or whether it's just violence and social dropout or fallout, rather? What are the things that you put in place for your clients, for regular people, that you think most people would be able to do, and it would give them a fighting chance of kind of being able to navigate at least the beginnings of some of these crises?
Yeah, man. I kind of approach it from the stance that, like, the social aspect, you got to kind of make a decision whether you're going to hunker down or you're going to bug out. And having both of those options, I think, is really good. The first 24 hours, from everything that I've read and studied and seen, is going to be it might be chaotic, but it's going to be when the roads are open and when you're going to have to be able to make a decision. Once people realize there's no help coming, then things start getting locked down. Then the guerrillas are in place and things like that. So being able to have a hard room or harden your home so that if you do need to actually stay in place is something that you want to be able to do. Having provisions at your house where you can, I say at least 90 days is your first mile marker, because by then you're either going to know, like, you got to get out of there, or if you do stay past that first 24 hours, you want to have at least 90 days to be able to stay in place. Making sure that you have firearms and everything to defend what you have is huge. Otherwise, you're just storing up what you have for someone else. And making sure you have medical resources as well. In the wake of a lot of natural disasters, it's actually like people getting sick from like small injuries or just from the actual the event that kicked the thing off that can be an actual issue. Making sure that you can surveil and have layers of security around your house so that you can actually see who's coming. It gets pretty in depth, making sure that you have the ability to escape your house from any level of your house if necessary, ladders in the right places, if you need to get up to the attic, if you need to get out a window, different things like that. Making sure that you have a cold position near your house so that if you do, your family has to evacuate and say everyone has to jump out their windows. You guys know where your cold position is, and having a method to keep accountability with everyone and communicate with everyone. If you do, when you're building out your provision for bugging out, like, yes, having your bug out bag situated, and then having a larger bag, if you're able to grab that with long-term provisions and clothing and different things like that. But then having your next position where your next cold position where you guys are going to link up, and having about 6 of those positions on the route to your actual place where you're going to set up camp again. So if you guys are coming, like, you're at work when it happens and your wife's at home when it happens and she has to evacuate the house and you go to the house and you miss her, like, when you get to when she gets to the next waypoint, how long is she going to wait there? Is there any way she can mark that environment so that she has been there and how many people she has with her, and if everyone made it? and that she's going to the next location. It takes quite a bit of planning. So those types of things, and then that next position, how are you going to get provisions out there and last in that last final position where you're bugging out too. And then ideally, if comms are up, having alternative communication other than your cell phone, I like Garmin products, Garmin InReach minis and things like that have access to satellites, sat phones. And there's some new radios that are better than ham radios that my guys are introducing, but having ham radios, you need a license. I don't want to break the internet, but in these situations, do you need a license? So that's kind of how we start building those things out. And this is for like the worst case scenario, like basic home security. That's kind of a similar, but a much easier nut to crack. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you mentioned about having communication capability. I don't know, I'm probably going to have to look these up, and maybe we can give links to them. I don't know if you offer these and sell them in the US, so maybe we could do that. But what do you think about Starlink? What are your thoughts about Elon Musk's network? And is that worth it? Is that something you would buy? Have you tried it?
I have some guys. I haven't tried it. I'm extremely curious about it. I really am very positive on it, but I haven't gone down the rabbit hole yet. But all of them are the same kind of rabbit hole. If you get what I mean. What I'm thinking about though is the fact that my guys that have tried it, that have been in rural areas, love it, and it's been very effective for them. So I'm very interested in it, but I haven't tried it yet. That's what I'll say about Starlink. But being able to, and I know they make some devices that are mobile now. Another, huge conversation is your mobility, and do you have a vehicle, that can get you off-road places, and then that you can live in if you need to, right? And I was looking at putting Starlink on one of my rigs for those exact reasons. But yeah, I'm positive on Starlink.
Interesting.
But I probably need to do more research. So,
I think we all do. I'm going to try it.
There's some really good trucks out there that actually have internet built into them now. I think a lot of it is you have to have some kind of provider. But I know some of them do have an uplink so that you get internet and you can take them pretty much anywhere. They're really nice.
Does Tesla have it built in? I'd
be surprised if they don't. That'd be a little weird to have this futuristic car that can't connect to the internet.
Yeah. No, they for sure do.
But how many charging stations are you going to find that are working in the event?
This is another question, right? What do you do with regards to electricity? There's batteries that you can buy, but do you have any recommendations about generating electricity?
There's a lot of solar options, whole entire mats, military grade mats that you can get, that you can roll out, that can charge things. A lot of it just takes time. You have to be in a safe place long enough to be able to do it. But there are a lot of solar options. They just take time. You have to be able to be in one place for an extended period of time, or mount them on top of your vehicle as you're moving and things like that. The Tesla thing, I saw a guy that created I don't even want to go too much into it, but it was a portable Tesla charger generator built based off gas, which was an interesting contraption. But, I don't know that the best vehicle is the vehicle you have, but, Teslas and things like that, the battery life, and it's not the vehicle I would want to necessarily be in for something. If we're in the big one, EMP protectors on vehicles and on your home. It's another huge consideration, especially since, the World Health Organization, to say a buzzword, I don't want to get us big, especially since those that effectively predicted COVID are also running tests and training events around a massive EMP or cyber attack.
Right. That is scary stuff. Just for people who are listening who maybe don't understand what an EMP is, can you explain a little bit about what it is and how it works?
In basic grunt terms, it's an electromagnetic charge that goes off and turns everything that has that is electric, that it turns it into a paperweight. So everything stops working. So Oh, look at the NSA. Anyways, everything stops working. I'm just gonna put something on top of you. Everything stops working. So like your power goes off, the computer stops working. Your vehicle is got an electric brain. It stops working. Everything stops when an EMP goes off. The power is now out, and these things are not repairable and not turned back onable. And so we are effectively in whatever age it was before these things were created. Now, I really, really become uncomfortable when I see guys with all their guns being like, yeah, you want to come fight America? Come on in. We got guns, man. I'm like, homie, you're fighting the wrong war. Like, besides the fact that they're literally socially engineering all of us, people with values, into dinosaurs. Besides that, which all they have to do if things say, I don't know. Besides that attack, the PSYOP, the reality is you shut the power off in this country. I don't even want to say it over the internet, but like, how are people going to survive, man? This place will cannibalize itself in very quickly. So, especially with the lack of values that we have. Maybe there was a time when your neighbor would come over and give you give you some milk if he knew you had kids and you needed to survive. And maybe there was a time when you could go to your neighbors and sit there. And I got a couple neighbors like this, and we'd be like, hey man, we got to figure this out. Like, what can we do? I got some chickens, I got some flour, and like, maybe we could like plant a quick garden and protect it and stuff. Like, but for a lot of people out there, especially in these major cities, especially where there's lots of guns, shut the power off, people are going to start society will cannibalize itself. And then you just come in and clean up the mess, let them cannibalize themselves for a few months, and then come in when everyone's desperate with your Hegelian dialectic and have a solution to a problem that, you may or may not have created.
So basically
I've seen it done, but anyways.
Yeah, wow. Probably most people don't even consider what actually happens socially. I think we've talked about that quite a lot on this episode. We've gone through practical tips. I think the last thing, because we only have like maybe 10 minutes left, the last thing that I personally am interested in is your thoughts about the psychological, spiritual aspect of prep and survivalism. Like, you talked about faith a lot. How important is faith? You talked about values a lot. Like, you obviously have a lot of values, and you obviously have principles that guide you, because if you didn't, you may have decided to level that village. How important are those things for getting through these events? And is there a way that, because the way that I see it is there's been a really good job done to get the strong men out of the picture, whether that's a long play of just making them more feminine, toxic masculinity, all of that stuff. And we've covered those things on this show too. What are your thoughts about the current state of society when it comes to strong men? And how can we get to the point where we can actually become the strong people that we need to be to get through this?
Yeah. Awesome question, man. There's like two things in there. When it comes to, spirituality and a higher set of values, I think we can prepare for everything that we can, but I think that the onslaught of what I think we possibly are dealing with maybe goes beyond just human greed. We have all these celebrities like worshiping Satan, and there's like people, attacking our kids and things like that. Like, evil, it's not just bad anymore. Like, there's evil, like, that's actually extremely aggressive and active and vocal and like, hi, I'm at your school with my dick out, dressed like a girl. Like, what? Like, how? Like, why are people not going to jail? Why are parents not being stopped by the cops at the principal's office so they don't kill the guy? So there's something in a realm higher than just this physical that I think is happening. And I believe if you don't have the spirit of truth in you, it's going to be very hard for you to distinguish. You're going to be concerned about the wrong things. You're going to be fear driven. You're going to be fear. They're going to be able to use fear to cause you to take and do whatever they say to do, because you really don't have a higher power. You know what I mean? Like, I know I am willing to die for something. I know that, and I don't want to be too preachy, but my God hasn't failed me. And I know that when I die, it's going to be the way he wants and when he wants. I literally got blown up by 60 some pounds of homemade explosives, and I prayed to him for a chance to come back. He'd let me come back, but I promised him I'd make it worth it. I promised him I'd make my life worth it. I'm lucky. I don't have to have a lot of faith because I have experience with him coming through for me. But what I would say to people is, you're going to need the spirit of truth in you. You're going to need something to help you deal with the fear and perform to a level that's going to be necessary for everyone who's leaning on you. And for me, the Holy Spirit, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. That's been what's guided me. I listened to his voice when I was getting out of the Marine Corps, and he said, go bounce at this bar. I'm going to make you a bodyguard. You're going to literally travel the world. And that's what happened. When I was 4 years old, I heard a voice that said, hey, go lock your family in the room. Don't go to sleep out here on the couch, because I was getting ready to go to sleep on the couch because I was like watching TV and stuff. And I listened to that voice, and I saved my entire family's life because some dudes broke in to try to assassinate my father, because he just started the first SWAT team in the Bahamas, and he was locking people up. He was locking a lot of important people up. In Iraq, I was standing on top of two 155 anti-tank shells that were ready to explode, and I saw something, and I was gonna like mess with it, and I heard that voice and said, don't push that, pick it up. And I picked it up, and then I realized that I would have been pink mist. You'd have been picking up Kevlar size, wallet size pieces of my body armor 200 yards away if I would have not listened. So what I'm saying is, and this is going to sound crazy, but all this sounds crazy, you can have a relationship with your creator. Jesus has been my homeboy, and he's the only reason I'm here and alive. And that helps me see through the deception, the mass deception that's trying to take place on this planet. When I see a celebrity or someone talking, the spirit in me opposes that spirit. I need people with this spirit to become strong enough to physically, monetarily, and oppose that spirit with the tools we have to have here on this planet. Otherwise, as we've seen in history, the evilness on this planet will subdue things, and it will get real quiet for a while. And maybe it's supposed to. It'll get real horrible for a while, I should say. Now, when it comes to masculinity, I blame men for everything. Okay, because we're ultimately responsible. We are the strongest force on this planet. The only reason men are being subjugated is because they're allowing themselves to be, and it has a lot to do with the psyop. If I was going to say something to men, I would say, I was lucky to develop and settle my masculinity for myself through war. And by not looking for it outside of myself, and looking for it with my Heavenly Father, you need to become the type of man that is like the sun in a solar system. When I approach things, it's, I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to treat you like a queen. I'm going to make your whole as many of your dreams come true as I can. But I first have to be a righteous man that is respectable, that is respectful, and that is formidable. And when you look in the mirror, you need to kind of have that conversation with yourself. And it's not about being strong and all this stuff. It's about, am I respectable? And then from influencing yourself to be respectable. And if you need to settle some things, go do something. Go climb Mount Everest. Go do something that will help you have some kind of struggle credentials. Just start take up jujitsu. Start doing jujitsu. You know what I mean? So that you have that inside of you first. And then you can start taking over chunks of your life and contributing to those in a loving, caring, healthy, strong, powerful, thoughtful way. And that's what we need, is we need more positive masculinity, which is driven by love. Whereas the whole toxic masculinity is driven by insecurity and ego. But you have to cultivate that strength as a man, so that when you get checked by life, your female, your kids, all those things, you have the strength and resilience of knowing who you are, because you earned who you are for yourself, to be able to react thoughtfully, powerfully, and in a loving way as often as possible, of course.
I love that. That's incredible. So well said.
Okay.
Yeah. Really, really powerful.
Big questions, man. So
this is it. We need to get to the bottom of this as fast as possible. There's no time left. We need to understand what are the things, that we need to do, and how do we need to think, most of all. On the last episode, and I'll end it with this, I suppose, because we're done for time, but on the last episode, I made the claim that the most important thing in prep, from my perspective, was your health. And potentially that's correct, but I also feel like what we've talked about today, which is a psychological, spiritual element, is even more important, because everything comes from there. Everything stems from the way we see the world and the way we see ourselves. So that whole conversation about faith, I'm going through this right now, and I never would have imagined I'd be seeing celebrities praise Satan and all of those things that we're being subjected to. No one would have thought that. And so the evil that you talk about, I really do believe it exists as well. And I think that the counterbalance to that is going back to the roots of, well, what is good? Christian values for me seem to be where it's at. So I'm going through that process now. And it's fascinating. I joined sorry, I don't mean to drag this on, but I joined a private group. I think you might know him. His name is Sebastian Enges, and he's a really popular guy on social. He's very, very charismatic, and he talks about things that are real. So I joined his private group, and I didn't know this, but they're all Christian. And they talk about the Bible, and they quote the Bible, and I'm like, what the fuck? This is crazy. For me. Yeah. But now I'm like, buying the Bible, I'm going to read it and all that stuff. So it's amazing.
It's a superpower, man. I've been guided my entire life. Like, I just hope no one looks at me and thinks like I'm cool because I'm cool. I have literally had someone inside me and next to me protecting me. I should be dead so many times, and telling me what to do. I'm performing at levels much higher than I am physically, mentally, and emotionally capable of, because I have the Holy Spirit inside me guiding me, literally. And it's such a beautiful way to live. There's so much love and power, actual power. So, some churches get it right, some churches get it wrong. But when you have a relationship with your Creator, it's the most peaceful, beautiful, and powerful thing in this life.
Just to quickly build on what Byron said, there is also a lot to be said about having that peace, that no matter how bad things are, with all the fear mongering and all the panic, what you're going to need to get you through is peace, because you can have peace even in chaotic situations. And that's what's going to help keep you sober minded, and really investigate that you are basing everything on scriptural truth, because there are many wolves in sheep's clothing as well. So that's it. What a great show. Thank you, Byron.
I got goosebumps. This is good.
This is a really good one. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything with us. I know this is valuable information, so we're really grateful for your time. And thank you for tuning in and watching the show. If you liked it, please subscribe, please like, please share. Everything you do to help us, we are truly grateful for, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
Outstanding.
Bye.
Boom. Bye.